Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you a few tips on how to keep your acrylic paint from drying out on your palette or on your canvas too quickly. One of the advantages of acrylic, of course, is that it dries so fast, so you don't have to wait days or weeks to put your next layer on. The disadvantage of acrylic paint is it dries fast. So you oftentimes don't have enough time to blend properly, or it dries out on your palette before you could use it all. So the first tip is when you start a painting, especially if it's a large painting, don't lay out all of your paints at once, because you may not get to use them all before they start to dry out. So lay out what you're working on right now. I know a lot of oil painters like to lay out their whole palette at once, but it doesn't work that well for acrylics. So lay it out as you're going. Number two thing, use a spray bottle to keep the paint wet. This is actually a mister that I got on Amazon, and it's used for misting makeup or things like that. So it has a light mist. I'll show you on a black canvas now because it's easier to see. So if you mist your paint, because you can mist it on your canvas as well as on your palette. Misting it on your canvas before you start painting will give you a nice moist area. Just don't soak it, just lightly mist it. The reason I use this one instead of, like, say, this bottle I have for to mist my plants is the plant mister. I don't know if you can see it, but it has much bigger drops. So if you're misting your canvas with a bottle like this, you're going to end up with big droplets. Misting it with something that's a very light mist will get it wet, but won't soak it and leave drops and leave spots on your canvas or on your palette, because you don't want to have blobs of water on your palette. You just want it to keep it moist. The other thing you can do with your palette, if you have, like, this is a meat tray that I've had in my stash for a while. But if you have a paper plate, if that's what you're using for a palette, or a styrofoam plate like this one, and you need to stop painting for a little while, cover it with some plastic wrap. This is actually a product called Press and Seal, which I find better than the plastic wrap because it will actually stick to the sides of your paper plate like this, and that will keep it wet for maybe overnight. I've used it overnight before, and it did fairly well keeping the paint from drying out overnight. The next thing I want to show you is you can also use products like these, which are designed to slow down the drying time of paint. So you mix a small amount, and the amounts are different, so you should read the instructions on each bottle. But you mix a small amount with your paint and it will slow it down. Slow down the drying time to give you more time to blend or to mix. Yeah, so don't use too much because that will mean your paint will lift rather than dry properly. You can also mix the paint with a tiny bit of water. Again, you should check with each manufacturer on their website what they recommend. Usually they recommend to use the slow drying products. There are also paints, such as this one is from Golden, called Open Acrylics, that are already, I guess, pre-mixed with some kind of retarder that will slow down the drying time of your paint. So not quite as slow as oil, but a lot slower than acrylics. Again, the more water you add to this, the slower it will dry. So you have to be careful if you if you want to dry by the next day, don't put a lot of water in it. Another tip would be, if you're mixing a lot of paint for a background or a larger area and you have to leave it and come back to it, get a couple of these cups. You can even get some smaller than this. They usually come like in a big package like this. So they're great to have in your art room. And you put a little bit of, or put whatever mix you have, put it in there and put the cover of it. Now, I'm not 100% happy with the seal on these, so I usually put a little bit of plastic wrap over it and then put the cover on it. And mark on the top what it is, what the mix is, so that you'll know when you go back to it. Because sometimes you have colors that are similar and you're not quite sure. So that's a good idea. Now the thing I use the most to keep my acrylics wet, let me move some of this out of the way, is a Stay Wet palette. This one is by Masterson's. It's probably the most popular one. This is a huge one that I've had for maybe 10 years. And it comes with a sponge, and you can see mine is well used and needs to be replaced now. I just wet this to show you what it looks like wet. So the sponge is not soaking, but it's very, very wet. Most of the time I use the smaller one, which is this one. And you can also get a tiny one. So it has, the lid is really tight, so you get a good seal. This one comes with the little cup, so you can actually mix your paint in there and keep it on your palette. It has this white sheet here. It's acrylic paper, and you soak this. I can't remember exactly what you do now. The directions are all on the package. You soak this in hot water, and this is the sponge that's underneath. See, mine is pretty wet there too. And you can get replacement sponges, replacement paper. I have had this paint here in this palette for maybe 3 weeks. So it's just starting to dry. But the thing I found with it too is if I know it's going to be a long time in the palette, I will mist it with some water before I close it up. You can also add more water as your sponge starts to dry out. Yeah, a lot of painters, I'm going to pull this out and we'll get back to that. A lot of artists use a glass palette and they put it in here and then close the top on their paint. Just give it a light mist of water. I don't particularly like the glass palette for my acrylics. It's absolutely fantastic for oil painters. The only thing is, make sure your oil paint doesn't get on the plastic edges, and of course you can't use the plastic cups with oil paint. But that is an option if that's something you would like to do. Also, you don't have to use the sponge and the paper with this if you don't want to buy, like if you run out and you don't want to buy extra. I'll show you how to make your own little palette now. All you really need is a container, and I have this palette that I bought many, many years ago. I don't even know where I bought it. It's a tiny little thing. But you don't have to have one like this. You can have a Tupperware tub that's like shallow and big enough for you to put all your paints in, and a lid that closes tightly. So if you want to make your own, I'm going to demonstrate with this little one now. You take a paper towel, I just wipe my hand off on, and I like to measure the paper towel out like this. Just fold it down on the edges so that it fits in your whatever size Tupperware tub or paint tub or whatever you have. You can even do this with your Masterson palette, like I said, if you run out of the sponges and the paper. So you put your paper towel in there. Sometimes I will put two layers. It depends on the paper towel, how thick it is. And then you just wet it. So I'm going to use a spray bottle of water here. So don't make it sopping, but make it damp. So you get all the corners nice and wet. Another little bit down here. I might have made too much. I'll show you what to do when you make too much water. So make sure it's all good and wet. Now, if you've got a little bit that needs to be drained out, just pour it out. Don't worry about getting it completely dry, because the whole purpose of this is for it to stay wet. Now, on top of this, in order to lay your paints out on it, of course you can't lay it out on paper towel. This is parchment paper. Now you can use this, you can use tin foil, aluminum foil, or plastic wrap, or even a piece of, I don't know what I did with my, piece of disposable palette. You can cut it to fit, which is what I'm going to do real quick. Okay, when you shake, nothing is quick, so I'll just speed this up so you don't have to watch. Okay, so you just lay this on top. You can put your paints right on there. You can always see the water. The paper towel underneath is really damp, which is good. So you put your, I have a little bit of dried up paint there. Put your paint in there. And let's grab a quick brush there. Let's see, and just, you can do all your mixing and whatever you need right there. And then when you're finished, close up, or give it a little spray first at the very end before you close it. Just a light mist with your misting bottle. And then close it up. And it should be good. I've used this, I've had it for maybe a week or more. So it should be good that way. Yeah, one more tip is keep your studio cool, because acrylics dry so fast, heat is the enemy. So if you live in a really humid, warm place, you may have a lot of trouble keeping your acrylics wet. So air conditioning would be great. If not, I hesitate to use a fan, because that will blow around dust and pollen and who knows what. Maybe it would be better to paint in the cooler evening or at night. Here where I live, heat is not an issue. It's northern Canada. It's freezing here. It's actually minus 37 Celsius as I record this. I think that's somewhere around minus 14 Fahrenheit. So yeah, heat's not an issue here. Staying warm is an issue. Anyway, sometimes you actually want your paint to dry faster. So most people use a hair dryer. And I suggest, if you're going to use a hair dryer to dry up your paint, don't have it right down on the canvas, right? You have it about a fist away, maybe 2 fists away on the lower heat setting. And just dry it until the sheen goes off it, because acrylic paint dries rather flat, matte, I guess. And yeah, so just dry it until the sheen goes off it. Once it's dry, wait a few minutes before you start painting, because the paint will be warm. And if you put acrylic paint on a warm surface, it's going to dry just like that. So give it a few minutes to let it cool down first. I think that's it. If you can think of anything else that you use to keep your acrylic paints from drying really fast, just let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to like and subscribe if you found this video helpful. And I'll see you next time. Bye.